Krystal Bailey was a 29-year-old from Plainfield, Vermont. She was a mother of 4 and had a very tough life. On the night of February 25th, 2017, Krystal was in a car being driven by a drunk friend. They wrecked, then ran off. The driver was caught. Krystal was never seen again. I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. We discuss the topic of water, actually bodies of water, quite a bit on Unfound. Sometimes it's an ocean, for example when we covered J.R. Mullihan's disappearance, or a gulf, Tiffany Daniels, Dave Madot, Kent Monroe, and Omar Shearer, or a river, Jake LaChale and Shane Fell, or a pond, Esther Westenbarger. We can extrapolate this out even further to possibly include Cameron Remmer and Jackson Miller and their proximity to the Golden Gate Bridge. And none of this takes into consideration all the searches of lakes and reservoirs we've discussed over the past 5 years. The tough part? Except for Esther, there's really no proof any of the others, and many more, ever ended up in any water at all. Zero proof. This makes trying to solve their disappearances very difficult. Well, in the disappearance of Krystal Bailey, after a car wreck, her friend got saved after almost drowning in a nearby roaring creek. Everyone seems to believe Krystal ended up in it as well. But was she really washed away? And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Lyonez's website, charleyproject.org. Krystal Bailey, as you will hear, had one of the toughest lives we've covered on Unfound. And true, some of it was of her own making. But it started at 7 years old, with her father murdering her 13-year-old brother in 1994. The father ended up dying in prison. This started a 2-decade spiral in which Krystal got into drugs. She had 4 children who were taken away from her due to her inability to parent them. In addition, people believe Krystal was pregnant with child number 5 at the time of her disappearance. So, on February 25th, 2017, Krystal was with her new boyfriend Brian and her friend Allie. They were drinking and most likely doing drugs. Deciding that they needed more alcohol, Allie and Krystal left to get more, with Allie driving. Not far down the road from Brian's, on the outskirts of Plainfield, Vermont, Allie hit a guardrail on Brook Road, near Cameron Road. When EMTs showed up, the 2 women ran off. Allie jumped into the lower Great Brook that was high and fast-flowing, due to the snow melting. She almost drowned, but was saved by those same EMTs. It is not known for sure if Krystal ended up in that brook or not. She was never seen again. An extensive search of that area revealed only her phone and purse on the bank of the raging creek. My belief is Unfound has moved missing persons theory forward quite a bit in the past 5 years. The program approaches disappearances differently than any other podcast or TV show out there. However, there are still no good ideas on what can be done when people believe a missing person went into a body of water but isn't found immediately. In an effort to eventually solve this problem, let us try to answer these 3 questions regarding Krystal's disappearance. Number 1, is a splash heard by Allie enough to believe Krystal also went into the brook? Number 2, if she went into the water, should not have Krystal, dead or alive, gotten hung up in the branches along the brook due to it not being that wide? And number 3, does not covering a disappearance like this finally demolish the whole smiley face killer hoax? Krystal's family understands that no foul play has occurred, but they continue to be confused on why her remains have not been found. The guest for this episode is Krystal's sister, Michelle Audette. Unfound News. Thank you for all the birthday wishes. I'm 51 now. Really, I don't feel much different than when I was 35. Dare I say it, I think I actually look better now. And I continue to say, thanks to all of you, my friends, and my family, I am the most fortunate guy in the world. Next, I'm here in Pennsylvania seeing my dad. I flew here on Monday, August 2nd, and I will be returning to Florida on August 11th. I will crank out as much Unfound work as I can while I'm here. Finally, Dr. Telesco and I have agreed on a date for me to speak at Nova Southeastern University later this year. That date, November 4th. I'm really looking forward to it. And oh, one more thing. I need to give an August 7th birthday shout out to 2 of the most influential people in my life. Longtime friend Doug and my good friend and possible ex-girlfriend Suzanne. I hope you both have wonderful days. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on Podomatic, iTunes, Spotify, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Deezer, and YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us for the Unfound Live Show. All of you can talk with me, and I can answer your questions. Contribute to Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. You can also contribute at PayPal, paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. I also need to give a huge shout out to all the people who have monetarily contributed using Super Chat during the live show on Wednesday nights. Thank you for watching, and thank you for donating. The email address, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Merchandise, the books at amazon.com in both ebook and print form. Do not forget the reviews. Shirts at unfound-podcast.myshopify.com, or you can track down my assistant Heather in the Facebook group. Playing cards at makeplayingcards.com/sell/unfound-podcast. The website, theunfoundpodcast.com. And please mention Unfound at all true crime websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the sister of Krystal Bailey, Michelle Audette. Michelle, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you.
You are Krystal's sister. How many kids, how many siblings do you two have? What was your home life like as little girls, as teenagers? Let's get a feeling for the Krystal and Michelle family first.
There were 3 of us. There was myself and Krystal and our brother Michael. We were raised in some extremely bad situations, so our childhood was not great at all. We lost our brother when I was 12 and Krystal was 7.
Oh my. What happened?
He was murdered.
Oh my. Okay. Was his killer caught? Go to jail? Is this person still in jail? Or are they still in jail or what?
No, he passed away while incarcerated.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that. And what year would that have been?
1994.
1994, okay. So how did that affect you and Krystal?
That changed all of our lives. but it sent Krystal in a downward spiral. From that age on, she was always trying to escape the reality of everything that had happened, which led to her decision making and choices later on.
Mm-hmm. So even at 7 years old, she that affected her greatly.
Yes.
Wow. Would you and her, as little girls, I mean, not just even after it happened, but years later, would you talk about your brother? You know, remember him? I mean, what would she say that caused you to think that, you know, it was still affecting her? As I think most people would be, make it sounds like it was very, you know, hurt her quite a bit, affected her life, her choices. What would she say about it?
It was very hard, even though she was only 7 at the time, to comprehend what had happened, as it was done by a family member. And it was someone that was extremely close to us and to her. So it made it even harder to accept the fact of what had happened and everything that had led up to the events. We would talk about Michael all the time, still do today. You know, all the memories, all the pictures, everything that we have.
How old was he?
13.
13-year-old murdered by another family member.
Yes.
Huh. Okay. How did that affect your parents, your mother, anybody else? How did it affect like the adults at the time?
It really affected my mother, like it would losing any child, and now to lose Krystal and lose a second child is just reliving the nightmare.
Yeah.
Just like it is to lose another sibling, or my only other sibling I had.
Yeah. Right.
It brings up all of the memories from way back then.
Right. So 1994 to 2017, so 23 years later, it's like going through the whole thing all over again.
Yes.
Okay. All right. How did that affect you? I know this episode is about Krystal, but how did it affect you? Why do you think that maybe it affected Krystal differently than it affected you? How do you explain that?
I think I chose a different path in life and refused to live through what I had lived through. And I also got pregnant at 17, so I had a young child and refused to raise a child in that kind of upbringing.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to Krystal herself. You've already explained at 7, she has this traumatic experience with a brother being murdered. And what were some of the early signs that you saw, being her older sister, 5 years older, that you maybe noticed, you know, that she was on a different path? Were they right away at 7, or was it 10, 12, 13? How would you explain it?
Around the age of 12.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what'd you see? What did you notice that was different from you?
She was starting to dabble in the drinking, the alcohol. She was drawn to dating older men. None of those relationships were healthy relationships. They all involved domestic violence, which kind of points to what we experienced in our childhood.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So she was kind of emulating what she had seen.
Yes.
All right. And so when you say older men, she's 12 and they're like adult age?
Yes.
Like 20?
19 to be exact.
19. Yeah. Okay, 19. And she was only 12?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So turbulent childhood, 12 years old. You start to see signs as her older sister. Of course, you experienced yourself. Is there anything maybe at the time that you can remember, going back to then, that, you know, you tried to talk maybe some sense into her, or try to get inside her mind to maybe put her on a different path? Any success like with that? I guess not. But what did you say to her, and what would she say in return?
It got really hard. We didn't have any success trying to get through to her, and I actually had moved out around that time. So she felt like I was abandoning her. And so it was really hard to get through to her, to have her listen, to not repeat any mistakes I had done or any mistakes that we had witnessed as children. But at that age, she was defiant, like most teenagers, and knew best and didn't want to hear anything from anyone.
Right. Was your mother any help in this situation?
My mother was not much of a help at that time. She was still going through the grieving process of losing our brother. And so everyone deals with that differently, especially as a parent. Now, as a parent, I can understand to a degree. And so it was hard to control, per se, an out of control teenager.
Yeah. Right. As far as you can remember, did Krystal have any joy in her life? You make it sound very dark here. Did anything that she enjoyed, any interest, things that she got into at all, or do you just remember that time as just being, Krystal, having problems and making bad decisions, etc.?
There were times that Krystal was clean and sober, and she enjoyed being outside. She loved being in the water. She loves nature in general, hanging out with friends and dancing, singing, karaoke. So there were good times.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about her friends? What kind of friends did she have? Were they friends that kind of were on the same path that she was, or were there any friends that maybe tried to talk some sense to her? How do you remember that?
There were quite a few friends that were on the straight and narrow path who tried to talk sense into her, but the ones that were on the same path as her always seemed to get the most notice and listened to.
They were the ones that won out in these situations. Yeah. Okay. Did Krystal graduate high school?
Krystal did graduate high school.
She did. Okay. Well, she managed to do that. Any jobs? What was she into? Like I said, I really don't know how bad it got there early on in her teens. But did she have any jobs? Anything like that?
She did some odd and end jobs between like convenience stores and fast food restaurants, but nothing sustainable for the long term.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you've already mentioned these relationships. Did this kind of thing continue? No, she's 12. You said 19. When she became 14, 15, was it also 19, 20 years old, or did the guys get older? How would you explain it?
The guys kept getting older.
Okay. So she went from 12 and 19 to 15 and maybe 25 or something, something like that.
There was usually at least a 10-year age difference.
Wow. Okay. What about your father? Any role in any of this? Where was he? Where was his standing in all of this?
So he is actually the one that killed our brother.
He is. The listeners should know that I think I remember that your brother was murdered. I'm not sure that ever came up in any discussion that we had. I wonder if I even want to ask about this, but can you just give the generalities of why this happened?
Because he was a very bad person and, like I stated before, made our childhood a living hell.
Okay. All right. Wow. And then, like you said, he went to jail and died there. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, 7 years old, has this happen, gets down on the wrong path. You try to talk to her. Maybe she has some decent friends, not a lot of help there. She has these older men who I'm sure none of them were any good for her. And of course, we know that it's supposed to be illegal and everything else. But this is what's going on. Let's move on to this. She did end up having some children. What When did this happen? Who was the father? How many? Let's talk about that a little bit.
She does. She has 4 children. She had her first child at 17. She was the light of her life. By the age of 2, though, it was very apparent that she was not in any position to parent a child at that point. And so my mother has custody of her oldest child.
Okay.
My second oldest niece is currently living with her biological father, and I am raising my niece and nephew.
So she had 4 kids over the span of how many years? From 17 to...
The oldest one will be 17 this year, and the youngest one just turned 7, so within 10 years.
Okay, so she had her first child at 17, then her last child at 27.
Yes.
Okay. And like you said early on, a couple years of the birth of the first child, it was obvious that because of addictions and other things, she just could not do it.
Correct.
How did Krystal react to the first child and maybe other children being taken away from her? How did she react?
The first child, I think it relieved her a little. She was still very young and experimenting and trying to figure out where she was going in life. With the younger 3, it was harder on her. She thought that she could parent, but that was proven not to be capable because of the addictions. And so it was hard for her to lose custody of her children like it would be for anyone in her shoes. She loved them with all her heart. She just was not in a position to parent them and keep them safe.
Was this something that somebody had, was there something that happened? For example, did she go to jail and that's how the children got it taken away from her? Or did you or somebody else sit her down and say, we have to do this? Or, how did that all, or was she the one that came up with the idea of this? I mean, how did this all happen? How did it get started that, these children got taken away?
There were multiple occasions that she would be incarcerated and we would be raising the children already. And then it came to a point in time where she was living with me and was out with her children, and one of them had gotten injured. And so the state had stepped in and said that she couldn't parent them anymore.
What was the circumstances that the child got injured? What happened?
They weren't being properly supervised.
Okay. All right, we have to remember that Krystal was 29 when she went missing in February of 2017. So first child at 17, last child at 27, and then 2 years after the birth of her last child is when she disappeared. And so she had these children taken away, and at the time of her disappearance, was she caring for any of them, or were they all in the custody of other people?
They were all in the custody of other people.
Okay. And what was she doing with her life, in 2016 into 2017, being that she didn't have any kids to take care of? What was she doing? And I guess I also have to ask, how often did she see her 4 children?
Her oldest one currently resides out of state from where we were located. Her other 3, she was seeing them fairly regularly.
Okay.
But she was living her life as she had known how to live it.
Pretty wild.
Yes.
Pretty wild and undisciplined.
Yes.
Okay. And so that's what was going on 2016 into 2017. Of course, we're going to get into the circumstances of that day, February 25th, 2017. But for you, of course, you're 5 years older. You have your own family. You have children, etc. How often, these, once again, moving up to 2016, 2017, how often were you seeing her? How often were you talking to her? And what were those encounters like?
So I was seeing her approximately once a week when she was seeing her children, because I had her 3 children. I was the one that was caring for them and raising them.
Okay.
And I was having not weekly phone calls, but probably weekly text messages back and forth with her to make sure that she was still okay as okay could be.
Right. When you would see her, would you ever talk about her life and things like that? Or when you would see her, was it mainly just her having interaction with her kids?
It was probably 50-50, so it was interaction with her children, but it was also me harping on her about her life choices and to straighten them up so she could have her children back. And being the older sister and the caring sister, making sure she was okay. Again, her history of relationships, they were always domestic. So she was always getting injured. And so my job is to try to protect her.
Sure. Any of these conversations over those years, maybe starting, I guess, maybe in her teen years and going up the whole way until she disappeared, any talk about trying rehab? Did she ever do that? Was she interested in that? Going to some sort of counselor to get her out of these abusive situations? Any of that tried over those years?
She had seen multiple counselors. They did not seem effective. She had done rehab, I believe, 3 times. And every time it would work for a couple of months, and then it overpowered, and she went right back to it.
And that's something we hear about quite a bit on Unfound, that rehab, very hit and miss. And many of the missing people who had addictions and vices who went missing have tried rehab multiple times and it not worked. And in fact, some people have disappeared be right before going to rehab, and then some others have disappeared right after coming out of rehab, which is something that we still study and try to theorize on the program. Okay. So this is what's going on. 2016 into 2017, did she have a job? What was she doing for money? What was the situation?
She did not have a job. She was living with a new boyfriend at the time, and I'm assuming he was supporting her.
Okay. Now, something that came up in our discussions, I don't know how it would ever play a role in the disappearance, but we're going to talk about it anyway, is that, of course, she had 4 children already. Is there a belief that she was pregnant at the time of her disappearance?
There is belief that she was pregnant at the time of her disappearance.
And why is this suspected? Is this something she told you or other people? Did she take a pregnancy test? How did it come up?
She told my mother and my oldest niece, and the last time I had saw her before she had disappeared, I commented that she was pregnant, and she denied it, but there was no denying that she was pregnant after you've seen it 4 times.
Okay, you knew what she looked like, having been pregnant 4 times before. You just knew that look.
Yes.
You could just tell. Okay.
You could just tell. Sisterly intuition.
It's sisterly intuition, of course. Okay. And can you even guess at the time of her disappearance how pregnant she might have been?
We believe 4 months.
Okay. And do you believe that this new boyfriend was the father or somebody else? Or
that is our understanding.
Okay. All right, and we're just going to use his first name for purposes of this discussion. What is his first name? Because we'll talk about him a little later. What's his name?
Brian.
All right, Brian. Okay. So a lot going on, and I'm taking for granted Brian was also wrapped up in all the same things she was.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like, just in general, sounds like Krystal had a lot going on. And in your opinion, once again, being her older sister, 5 years older, she comes over, you see her once a week, you're taking care of some of her children at the time. Would you say that Krystal's situation at that time was getting better or getting worse?
Getting worse.
Okay, would you say that it, with once again the choices that she's making, would you say that it was the worst you'd ever seen, or Were there worser circumstances in the past, or how do you look at the beginning of the year of 2017 in regards to Krystal?
I believe she was at one of the worst points in her life.
Was she? Okay. All right. And so she's doing these things. And so let's move up, maybe just with the, right before she went missing. The disappearance date is accepted as February 25th, 2017. But maybe just in those weeks before, we've already talked about her probably being pregnant. Anything else going on that was maybe new that you can think of in any way that maybe you kind of look, maybe at the time it was just accepted, but now in 2021, we're doing this interview on August 1st, 2021. You look back now and says, well, there was this certain thing that was different about her, besides, of course, you suspecting that she was pregnant. Anything else?
She was desperate to get her children back, and she was not on the path to do that. So she knew that she was losing them permanently.
Getting to the point where she wouldn't get them back. I guess even if she cleaned herself up, it would probably take a probation period or something like that.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm guessing that had to have, despite her addictions and her continuing to make these choices, that probably affected her quite severely, emotionally.
Yes, it would. I think it would any parent, no matter their circumstances.
Right. Okay. All right, so let's move up to February 25th, 2017. You personally, what were you doing that day? What do you personally remember about that day? Maybe I can ask you this. When was the last time you spoke to, or maybe you had a text with Krystal before February 25th, 2017? What do you remember about that?
I had last communication with her about a week prior to that, and we obviously had a disagreement on her choices. And was left disagreeing on her life choices, where she knew the ultimatums of what her choices were doing. The day in particular, it was abnormally warm for Vermont. I was at home I had 4 kids at home at the time. And we were just having a normal day.
Okay. Maybe I can ask you about that last conversation, about her choices and everything. You said that maybe trying to get her children back, but didn't look like she was going to be successful. When this topic would come up, and once again, this is just days before she disappeared, what would she say? I mean, she probably wanted to get her kids back, but she wasn't making any changes. How did she try to rationalize that in her mind?
She wanted her children back in the worst way and would do anything in her mind to get them back, but her actions would not follow through and prove that, so that she could be safe for them. Again, the addiction was stronger than what she could do.
Right. Okay. All right, so February 25th, you said it was unusually warm for Vermont at that time, that day.
Yes.
What was the temperature?
If I remember correctly, around 50 degrees. Let me remind you, we're normally in the 20s.
Yeah, of course. Right, February. I've never been to Vermont, I don't think. Maybe as a real little kid with my parents on a trip or something. But, Vermont, I usually think of that as being a cold state. So I think that makes sense. That's how you remember that day. Did you have a job? What were you doing that day? Where were you? What were you doing?
I did have a full-time job, so I was working during the day, and then at night I was home with the kiddos. Okay.
So it was an unusually warm day, and I have it here that, to ask you. But we're going to get into it that, when we get to the actual disappearance in this creek and brook, this unusually warm weather caused a lot of snow to melt. There was the rivers and streams and things were high.
Correct.
Okay. And so you like had snow maybe a week before or something, and then it kind of switched, I guess.
More like the day before.
Like the day before. Okay. So it snowed the day before, and then the next day. So on February 24th it snowed, and then on February 25th it was 50 degrees.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, that certainly is something. Okay. And I'm originally from Pennsylvania, so I kind of remember days like that when I lived there for the first almost 28 years of my life. Okay. So the weather, February up and down and all around, cold, then seasonably warm. And so we move, once again, on February 25th. What did she do earlier that day? Who was she with? What was she doing? And then we'll, of course, move up to that night of this car wreck. But what now, a few years later, what do you understand about what Krystal was doing earlier that day?
My understanding now is she was with Brian and one of her friends, Allie, and they were essentially partying all day long.
Okay, at Brian's?
Yes.
Okay, and where does he live? That's in the same jurisdiction of where the car wreck was, or what town would this be where Brian lives?
So I believe it was on the Plainfield-Berry town line area, so in the vicinity of the car accident.
Okay. And so they're there. That's all they're doing. The three of them. Do you know of anybody else? Have you ever heard of anybody else being there that day?
I have not.
Okay. And who is Allie? We're going to find out she was the driver of this car. But how long had Krystal and Allie known each other? Did you know Allie? Had you ever met her? Were they friends from like high school or what?
I had met Allie a few times, and they were friends from high school and throughout after high school.
Okay. Did you ever, what kind of opinion did you have of Allie?
She had a rough life as well and was on the similar paths as my sister.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so like two peas in a pod.
Yes.
Okay. But that day it was just two women and Brian, so Ellie didn't have a guy there. It was just the three of them.
Correct.
Okay. And when you say partying, drinking, doing drugs?
Yes, that is our understanding.
Okay. All right. So they're doing that all day. And it gets, I guess, to be that evening, that night. It gets dark. Of course, in February, it's going to get dark fairly early, but you can give us the exact time that you think that this wreck happened. But at some point, it seems that Krystal and Allie decided to leave Brian's. And why were they doing this? Where were they going? How far were they going to have to drive? What do you know about all of that?
So from what I know, this accident occurred somewhere between 11 and 12 at night, and they were headed, I'm assuming, to a store for more alcohol is what we have been told.
Okay. Would there have been stores that sell alcohol in Vermont that would be open at like midnight? Is that unusual? Is that common?
I believe the cutoff time in Vermont is midnight exactly, so it's not that uncommon.
Okay. So they maybe thought, well, we have to get out there before the stores close, possibly, if they
Yes.
if they wanted to continue to do this. Okay. And like you said, Brian was a new guy. Do you know how many times? I mean, was Krystal living with him? Is that where she was living then? Being that, or did she have her own place? Was she living? I guess she was living with him.
She was living with him.
Okay. So maybe she's familiar with these roads, but, if they're liquored up, if they're drunk, maybe that doesn't so much matter. But so they decide they're going to go get more alcohol. But the thing is that the car they're going to drive is Brian's, but Allie decides to drive
Correct.
Brian's car, even though Krystal, I guess, is the girlfriend. Any reason for that you can think of? Ever been explained to you why maybe Brian didn't go and they didn't stay at home, or Krystal drove? Any understanding of that?
My only understanding of that is everyone, or at least the girls, assumed that Allie was the most sober one, is the only logical explanation that I have to that answer.
Okay. All right. And we will get into, if you've had opportunities to talk to Allie, we'll get into that a little later. All right. So they're driving, and then this wreck happens. Where does it happen, and how far approximately did it happen from where Brian lived?
So, from my understanding, it was probably about 10 minutes from Brian's house, is my understanding.
So not far.
Correct.
Okay. And so what is your understanding about the wreck of the car? There are witnesses. What do you understand? There, of course, it seems reasonable to believe if, and I'm going to be doing a map for everybody listening. I'm going to do a Google Map video of that road and describe where I think they actually hit this guardrail and everything. But what is your understanding regarding the wreck and everything that happened right after that?
So my understanding is somehow, I'm not sure if they hit maybe a patch of ice since the temperatures had dropped overnight for where they were in the day or not, but somehow they had hit a guardrail. And there were two witnesses. One lady had stopped to ask them if they needed help or a ride to her house. They had both declined. There was another witness that has not come forward as far as I'm aware, but both of them called 911 about the same time and reported the accident to the state police.
Okay, like every, I guess, conscientious citizen should do. And so there's this wreck. They hit this guardrail. Luckily, they're out late at night, and there were witnesses. I don't know what the odds of that were, given that it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere on a back road. But that's at late at night. But I guess it happened, and so these people call 911, and what happens?
The first responders responded, so they are volunteer first responders. They get there before the police get there. They see both girls. They see some sort of head injury on my sister. And as they approached the girls, we are assuming the girls got spooked and they took off running from the first responders.
Huh. So is it your impression, once again, the way you understand it, do you think that Krystal and Allie did not realize that one of these witnesses called 911, or do you think that they were surprised when, I guess, what we would call an ambulance showed up, or how do you define that? That they would wait around, and that, I guess the reason I'm asking this is I think the listeners know a lot of times when drunk drivers get into wrecks, they run off right away. They usually don't wait around, but it seems that Krystal and Allie did. That's why I'm asking you this. Do you think that they even knew that somebody called 911?
I do not believe that they thought that anyone had called 911, and I believe they were trying to figure out a way to get out of the situation.
Okay. And have you ever seen the car that was wrecked?
No.
Okay, no pictures of it, nothing like that?
No.
Any understanding how bad it was wrecked? Did anybody ever tell you, well, it was really messed up, it couldn't be driven, or was it just a little fender bender?
From my understanding, it was just a fender bender.
Okay. All right. So they start running off, and once again, maybe one of the witnesses is there, but at least these EMTs, volunteer EMTs, are there. And what do the EMTs say happened?
They said as they approached, they asked if the girls were okay. They saw a head wound of some sort on Krystal, and that both girls then proceeded to take off from them. They were checking the car to see if there were any other occupants in it, and then they went to follow the girls.
Okay. And this would be out in some back road, and it was pretty, unless there's lights from a flashlight or headlights, it would be pitch black out there. No street lights or anything, right? No street lights.
No.
Okay.
Nothing, just dark.
All right, so Allie and Krystal decide to run off, and does anybody chase them, or are they basically just running by themselves?
The first responders follow them.
Follow them.
So yes.
Okay. All right, and I have it here in my notes. Somehow Allie was caught slash saved. And of course, Krystal, after she's and Allie are seen running off, Krystal is never seen again. But what is your understanding on how Allie, where was she when she got caught or saved? I guess she was in this creek that had overflowed. What are the circumstances of her being saved from the water?
So my understanding from the detective that night was that Allie had went in the water and was able to grab onto a branch of some sort and pull herself back up onto the bank where the first responders found her.
Okay. And Krystal was never seen again?
Correct.
Okay. Anybody actually, once again, it's being dark, anybody actually see her go into the water?
No.
Okay. All right. And being this, all of this of what you described, when did you find all of this out?
I received a call about 1:30 that morning from the state police.
And why did they call you? How did they get your number? How did that happen?
I am assuming they had my number from some previous arrest reports, I'm assuming, and listed as her nearest contact.
Huh. So somebody identified her as being the other person in the car, and we'll get into some of the items that were left behind here in a moment. But the EMTs knew that Krystal Bailey was in the vehicle, and then somehow the state police knew to call you.
Yes.
Okay. What was your initial reaction? Was this the first time maybe you got in a call like this, that Krystal was in a car wreck or something like that, or given all of her other choices, was this fairly common?
So this was the first time I got a call about being in a car wreck. I had received a few other calls prior to this for public intoxication or passing out at a public location. So when they called, I wasn't completely shocked until they filled me in on all the details.
So you get called at 1:30. Did you in the morning? Did you have to go somewhere? Did they just keep? Or were they just keeping you informed, or what did you have to do?
They were just keeping me informed.
Okay. So of course that would be 1:30. That's going into then of course the next day. Later that day, maybe you're in bed. You get up. Maybe you have work or something.
There was no bed. I didn't go to bed.
No, you didn't go to bed. Okay.
3 days.
Okay, you didn't go to bed. All right, so okay. Thank you for clarifying that. When did you talk to the police again? Or maybe I should ask you this. When they called you, did they give you any of the circumstances? There was a car wreck, and there was this woman, Allie. She got saved from the water, and Krystal's off somewhere. How detailed did they get with you during that first phone call?
They told me there had been a car accident and Allie had been driving, and that she was intoxicated, and they had the car crash and took off running, and it was believed that both of them had went in the water.
Okay. All right. And so that's what happens at 1:30. So no sleep after that. When do you talk to the police again? And what was the process of, of course, the next day, sun comes up. Of course, Allie's saved. She's alive. I don't know. Maybe they take her to jail. I don't. Maybe they take her to the hospital or something. Eventually charge her drunk driving or something. But regarding Krystal, is there a missing persons report filed first, or are there any searches done first? What do you remember about those first few days?
When it became daylight, they were doing searches. The water, as you had stated, was running extremely high and fast for that time of year. So it took them a little while to get a dive team into the water to make sure that they could be safe.
Sure.
But they did do searches with a dive team, and they did search around the bank of the water. Mm-hmm. But the concentration was in the water because that's where they assumed she had went.
Okay. And by the time the listeners are hearing our voices, I will have posted some articles about these searches. In fact, I know there's at least one picture. It seems like there's a guy sitting in a kayak or something, and there's like a snow picture, and it has to do with searching for Krystal. Did the police question Allie? I'm guessing you weren't there one-on-one with them, but what did you find out? Anything that Allie might have said about what she remembered about the night before and them running off?
They did question Allie, and her statement to the police were they were running. They went in the water. She did not see Krystal go in the water, but she heard a splash behind her, but never heard or saw Krystal actually go in the water.
Okay, and we have to remember because it's dark. That's probably the main reason. If this would have happened maybe in daylight, maybe she would have seen something. We're not saying Allie is lying or anything. It's just we just have to understand that it was dark. At what point did you decide to file a missing persons report? How many days in after these searches and everything? How long did that take?
I believe it was within 48 hours the police had listed her as a missing person.
That fast?
Yes.
Okay. And in speaking to the police, whether you or other family members, any experts in there? Once again, if we are to believe, and I think we could go either way on this, but if we're to believe that she did end up in the water like Allie, any experts on the water flow there, and if she went into this brook that was really a stream, like almost like a small river due to the melting of the snow, believe that she could have gotten the whole way over to the Winooski River, or anybody there able to give you any really expert advice, or was it just people guessing?
It was just people guessing. They were guessing that with the rate of the water flow that she could have made it to the Winooski River or to Lake Champlain, which are bigger bodies of water.
Sure.
But at this point, they were all guesses.
Okay. But their concentration, you would say, was in the water.
Yes.
All right. What about land searches? If water, I guess land would be secondary. How many people involved overall in these searches, and what direction did they go from the car wreck?
As far as land searches, again, like I said, their concentration was on the water search. Mm-hmm. To recover a body. That is where they were concentrated. So land searches were really limited to, I would say, within less than half a mile around the actual water.
Okay. All right. So the police do their searches. How many days would you say they did searches before they said, like, you know what, we're not finding anything. We don't know what to do. How long did that take?
I believe it was day 5.
So 5 days. Okay. Can you talk about a little bit of the different technology that you saw or you heard that they were using? How all out did they go?
They brought in the local dive teams and had them diving. I believe they were using a drone. And other than that, that was it.
Okay. Let's move on to this. Now, this might be what we call the rest of the case. Let's start here. Of course, police talked to Allie. What kind of charges did she get from that night?
She wound up getting charged with driving under the influence.
Okay.
It is my understanding she was 4 times the legal limit.
Oh my. So 4 times. So 0.08, I think, is the accepted level. So she was like 0.32?
Or a little bit higher, yes.
Oh my gosh. Have you personally been able to ever talk to Allie about that night?
No.
Have you tried to? Not interested in doing so? What can you say?
I don't know how to approach her. Mm-hmm. She still is not on a great path in life, and I don't want to add more burden to her. I'm sure she feels guilty enough.
Okay. Now, regarding Krystal's stuff, I guess we might call it, some of her things were found after this car wreck. I guess maybe after it became light and things could be seen. What things were found, and in your opinion, besides, of course, Krystal herself, what things are still missing?
So they found her cell phone and her little purse, which was more like just a little bag, which had her wallet in it. They were found along the embankment of the river, and that's all that was ever recovered.
Okay, when you say the river, you mean the like little creek where they wrecked, not the Winooski River, but the creek that ends up at the Winooski River.
Yes.
All right, so close to where the car hit the guardrail.
Yes.
Okay, so her phone is in this bag, like you said. So of course she went missing, but her phone's not with her, whether she went into the water or not. Any of her personal things still missing, or just her? Just the clothes. The clothes.
Just her clothing that she would have had on that night, her shoes.
Okay. All right, so that stuff's along the side, along the banks of this creek, and she is still missing. Now let's move on to this head injury. Have the EMTs or anybody else been able to give you, maybe a better insight into this? How severe did this head injury seem? Did it look like it could be dangerous? What about that? Any ideas?
So we'll remind everyone it was dark at the time.
Sure.
But the volunteer first responders, all they could say was that there was some kind of head injury and that it was bleeding, but they never got a very good look at it.
Okay. And I guess
their assumption is she hit it on the dash during the crash.
Okay. And I was just going to bring up, being that Allie's blood alcohol level 4 times the legal limit, let's just call it a 0.3. I'm guessing neither of them were wearing seatbelts.
Not to our knowledge.
Do you even know? Okay. I'm guessing if Krystal did hit her head on the dashboard, and then I'm going to take for granted she was not wearing her seatbelt either, because that's what seatbelts are supposed to prevent. Okay.
Correct.
So what you're saying is, even though somebody noticed that she had this head injury, she really did not get examined by the EMTs. In fact, as soon as the EMTs showed up, they ran.
Correct.
Okay. Do you happen to know that's all right? So we have this water situation. We have them running away. I can see Allie running, but let's talk about that a little bit. We understand why people who are drinking and driving run. With Krystal running as well, do you think it was a situation where she was just following a friend? Friends stick together, or could there have been another reason that she might have run? I mean, there's nothing illegal about. I mean, she's of legal age to drink. She's in the passenger seat. What are you gonna do? I don't know how many charges you can get for that, but she ran anyway. Any insight into that?
We believe she ran that night out of fear, knowing that this would not look good, attempting to get her children back, because that was obviously her goal, that it would be another strike against her.
Okay, so that could have been on her mind, and then on Allie's mind, she's just trying to get out of getting caught drinking and driving. Okay.
Correct.
The creek itself, of course, you stated that it has fast and high at the time, and before this episode comes out, I'm going to check the weather again those days before this all happened, so I can talk about it during the video when I diagram the area. How long did it take, do you even know, before the creek maybe got back down to regular levels? Maybe then it would have been a little easier to search. Any ideas regarding that?
I believe it took a couple of weeks for it to go back down to its normal,
oh my,
quote-unquote normal level.
Wow.
And I do know at one point there was a secondary search done via the Vermont State Police, and nothing was located, and they have now stated that there's nothing more they can do because they have no idea to know which direction she may have wound up or where she may have went.
Wow. And still to this day, once again, we're doing this interview on August 1st, 2021. No like local experts on water flow, anything like that haven't offered up an opinion on whether, once again, let's just say what it is, let's just call it what it is. A body's in this creek, it's flowing, so fast, so high that this human could float from roughly where the car wrecked into the Winooski River, which is a little over a half mile away. No expert has ever made an opinion on whether that's possible or not.
Knowledge.
Okay. The way, once again, I know you haven't spoken to Allie, but she remembers hearing the splash. Does she ever remember any yells? Anything once they started running, anything from Krystal at all before Allie ended up in the water?
Not that she has mentioned.
Okay. And when was the last time you spoke, and maybe we should state this, who is responsible for Krystal's disappearance? What law enforcement agency?
Vermont State Police.
Okay. How much interaction have you had with them over the past 4.5 years?
Enough that I probably drive them crazy.
Good.
The detective that was on the case that night is still the detective. She says that she wants nothing more than this case to be solved as much as we do, that it sits on her desk, but their hands are tied. They don't have any other theories or options or resources available to do anything.
Yeah, disappearances that could involve water. It doesn't even have to do, of course, we've covered at least 2 disappearances that could have something to do with the Mississippi River, Jake Latchley and Shane Fell, but even we have a disappearance involving the Atlantic Ocean. We have at least 2 disappearances, or technically 4 disappearances, involving the Gulf of Mexico, and they are certainly the toughest to try to figure out. How do you go about, if you believe somebody went into a body of water, then if the person is not found right away, what can be done? So I certainly agree with the detective on that. They did searches, I guess, as quickly as they could, and nothing, of course, was found. And if you don't find like a shoe of crystals or something in the water, then I'm not sure what you're supposed to think. When was the last search done in that area? How long has it been now?
It's been at least 2.5 years.
So it's been a while. Okay. Would you say, once again, if she went into the water, and like I said, we don't do a lot of theorizing, but I'm just kind of thinking out loud here that she went into the water, it's one of those things I'm just not sure what we can do. But has there been any talk, being that you have been bothering the Vermont State Police, about trying to organize maybe a more complete land search, maybe from where the car wreck was, west, toward where that creek meets up with the Winooski River, but on land instead of in the water? Any talks of that?
So the response I get from the Vermont State Police is they don't have the resources to do searches to that extent, and that there will be no more searches done unless there is evidence or a clue as to where she could have possibly went. And at this point in my mind, there is no evidence or clue that is going to surface unless it is her body. So it seems like a catch-22.
Is this an area where there are hunters or hikers that maybe might happen upon. Let's just say she didn't go in the water. Let's say that she ended up, maybe she went into the water, but somewhere downstream she managed to get out of the water by herself, and like Allie, who needed help. Any hunters, hikers that, are in that area, or is this an area around this river where no human goes? What's your understanding?
No, it's actually, there are hunters and hikers, and that was one of the biggest fears, is a hunter or hiker or a child at that point may stumble across the body, but nothing has been found yet.
Okay. Of course, you've already talked about your brother being murdered by your father back in 1994, and then, of course, this happens in 2017. How hard has this been on you, Michelle?
This is extremely hard. The not having the closure to be able to put her to rest is the worst part of all of this. Now that we are 4.5 years into this, to not have her somewhere where her children can go. We speak about her every day. We have pictures up. We talk about the memories, all the good times. All the children know that she loved them and just was not able to parent them safely. But that doesn't change the fact that she was their mother.
So her oldest, I'm just doing some math in my head, so her oldest would have been around 12 when this happened?
Yes.
And how old was her youngest when this happened? Like 2?
A little over 2, yes.
So the youngest does not even remember her mother.
His mother, correct.
His mother. Okay. What about the other ages? Any memories of Krystal, and what do you tell the younger children? I'm guessing the 12-year-old, kind of knows what's going on, but the younger ones, what do they know about their mother and why she's not around? If you can say on this podcast, being that it is going to be public, if you can say.
I can say public because I am assured in my own mind that none of these children have access to media. Okay. And so, yes, the oldest does know the whole story behind her mother's disappearance. She's almost 17 now. The other 3 only know that she was in a car accident and that she passed away. They do not know that she is still missing and has not been found.
Okay. Given that her history, do you think that the police did everything they could? I mean, once again, this is 2 women, one of which is drinking and driving. Of course, Krystal has a criminal record. I'm guessing when her name popped up on the police computers after this disappearance happened, they probably could see all the issues she had in the past. Do you think that influenced the police in any way in what they've tried to do to find Krystal?
No, I think in the very beginning, the first week or so after all this happened, they really did do the best that they could with the resources that Vermont has. Mm-hmm. Being a small state, we don't have a lot of resources like other states. And I think after that, they were just stumped. They didn't know where to go after this. Vermont does not have a lot of missing people that are never found. So it's very unusual to have here.
Right, I agree. And as the listeners know, this is the first disappearance we've covered in Vermont. So I can understand, of course, Vermont does not have a lot of people, so that's probably a factor too. But there's not a lot of disappearances happening in Vermont. That's why it took us almost 5 years to get to this state. And maybe they don't have a lot of experience in this area. But I just thought I needed to ask you that because, as you would probably guess, there are other disappearances of women and men, kind of like Krystal, where it was fairly obvious that the police did not do as much as they could because they viewed the person as not, being a fine, upstanding, citizen. But I'm glad that you believe, they did everything they could despite probably knowing about Krystal's history?
Knowing about Krystal's history, I know that some of them were skeptical in the beginning whether she had just ran and just disappeared and went off grid. But they explored all of those options to where she would have had ties to, and nothing came of those. And so, like I said, their search was on the water.
Yeah. What has Brian had to say about all this? Can't forget about him.
Absolutely nothing.
Show any interest, call you, take part in any searches, anything?
Nothing.
Nice. Okay. What has Allie done with her life? You said that she's seems that wreck and disappearance of her friend hasn't seemed to have changed her at all.
No, it did not help her in her life choices, and unfortunately is still on that same path.
Okay. Do you have a Facebook page or anything else set up for Krystal's disappearance?
We do have a Facebook page that we started a couple of months ago after submerging from close friends and family.
Okay. And what's it called? Give it the title right now.
It's called Krystal Bailey, Missing But Not Forgotten.
Okay. Krystal Bailey, Missing But Not Forgotten on Facebook. And are you one of the administrators for that page?
I am the only administrator on that page.
Only one. Okay. Well, before the episode comes out, I will surely link to it in all the places that Unfound is, so people can share it and like it, and of course follow it for any updates. Michelle, any final words before we complete this interview?
I am just glad to keep her case in the public eye, and hopefully if any experts have any suggestions or ideas that we can try to see where the water was flowing that night, or any other ideas, we are open to hearing them.
Okay. Well, I will do what I can for you as well. This is just the beginning of us knowing each other, Michelle. I want to continue to be a resource for you. As I've stated, these disappearances where there is at least a possibility that somebody went into a body of water and is not found right away are very, very difficult, especially if you're not even sure if the person went into water or not. It just doesn't sound like there was any foul play in this. This just seems like two young women running off in the dark, and one fortunately was saved, and the other one is still out there somewhere. But whatever the situation, until Krystal's found, I'll be here to help you in any way that I can. And I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And that was my August 1st, 2021 interview with Michelle Audette, sister of Krystal Bailey. I thank her for joining me and all of you on the program. I've done a YouTube video diagramming the road where the wreck occurred. I also analyzed the surrounding area and the Brooks path to the Winooski River. Please go to the Unfound Podcast Channel to see this presentation. Also, you should know that Krystal's disappearance is not on NamUs. However, after the interview, Krystal told me that the Vermont State Police will be taking care of that soon. I've spoken many times over the past 5 years that too many disappearances are solved by accident. And if we're relying on luck to solve them, well, thousands are going to go unsolved till the end of eternity. But when I'm talking about this, I usually mean disappearances that occurred on land, and that there's only the remotest possibility that the missing person is in a body of water. Well, this disappearances being solved by luck gets even worse when bodies of water come into play. Why? Well, in looking at the list of names from the intro to this episode,
there's only one person who we actually know went into the water, Esther Westenbarger. And the irony is that nobody thought she was in that pond until somebody discovered her and her car there. You may say, but Ed, what about Dave, Kent, and Omar? We're only taking Jeff Wandish's word that they were out on the water when the three disappeared. There's no video or other evidence to back Jeff up. In fact, almost 30 years later, his story is still a bit fantastical. And in saying that, I think I'm making my point for all these kinds of disappearances like Krystal's. Without video or something, there's no proof that any of them went into the water, nearby to where their vehicles were found. Tiffany Daniels, J.R. Mullihan, Shane Fell, all of them. In fact, we as the public only take for granted that these people went into the water because of where people discovered their cars and trucks. Well, that's faulty logic at best, when we consider how many people go missing nowhere near water of any kind, and they aren't found either. Example number one would be Jason Landry. Water doesn't cause disappearances. People, often the missing people themselves, cause disappearances. So, what's the answer? To me, there seems to be a kind of paradox going on among people who consider themselves to be water experts. On one hand, they say they know everything about currents and water temperature, and they can make predictions 1,000 years into the future regarding water levels, etc., etc., etc. Yet, on the other hand, people in positions of authority who are taking advice from these water experts seem to be hesitant to say, I don't think that the missing person is in the water, when search after search has been done in either a brook or an ocean and that person isn't found. I don't think these experts should be able to have it both ways. It's either science or it isn't. For me, and bringing this back to Krystal's disappearance, it may be time to wash away the memory of the searches that have been done and start from scratch. Maybe even on land. I'll leave the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.